But pretty much, yeah, fresh hops is kind of a real near dear part of my heart. I'm a born and bred Northwest brewer, so we're right, living actually right in Yakima right now. So you're starting to see all the vines get put up, and you're starting to see things kind of grow up the vines a little bit. So with this, I'll probably go off on some tangents. Stop me if you guys ever need to. Please feel free to stop me, ask a question. I'd love this to just kind of be a bit of a back and forth. Anything you guys would like to know, hopefully I'll have an answer for you too. So, yeah, so nice to meet all you guys. Happy to see you. I will go ahead and share my screen. I have just a quick couple slides that we'll go ahead and share right now. And then at the end, I have just a quick video. There's no sound, but I figured that would be a good time if any of you guys wanted to jump in with some questions. Anything I might have missed, that would be a perfect time. So I'll go ahead and let me know. All right, can you guys see my screen at all?
Yep. Looks good from here.
Okay. Perfect. So, okay. Brewing with fresh hops beer. It really is, like I said, it's kind of a heartstring. It's a cool time of year. It's something that is a pretty unique thing. It makes for a super, super unique beer. And on top of that, it's just something you can only brew once a year. We'll get into that a little bit, straight from here. But really, we'll start off with just what is a fresh hop beer. So a fresh hop is a beer using hops straight off the vine. So normally a hop, when you normally see it in a pellet, or at the very least a whole cone, maybe even in cryo, something like that. But normally the process is it'll go through with the top cutters, cut off those hops from the vines, get them sent through. There'll be a little bit of a process going through just to essentially separate the hops from the vines. But normally that next step will then go into a kiln where you will be drying out your hops. So essentially a fresh hop beer is one that you just skip that step entirely. You'll usually pull it right off the conveyor belt on its way to the kiln. So you're getting just a really nice, just a green, when I think of hops, I think of that smell, just a good, not vegetal, but you get a little bit of that nice fraction to the hop in there as well. So with a fresh hop, you're hoping, as I mentioned, you're skipping that whole step, but in order to make it a true to type fresh hop beer, you are really hoping that that hop will go from the vine, so actually on the vine, still growing, still living. From the time it's cut off that vine, you're hoping you can get that into a beer within 24 hours. The sooner the better. The three main enemies of a hop are going to be heat, time, and oxygen. So, of course, as you cut them off that vine, all three of those things are essentially going to start a ticking time clock right there. So, as you pull that off, you're going to expose it to a little bit of oxygen. The sooner you can get that in your beer, the better. Which is, it tends to produce, a little bit less of a bitter taste because you're getting a little bit more of that bract fraction. You're getting some more of that vegetal characteristics to it. And like I said, more of that green flavor profile. So that's really what you're going for. It's something that you can't really get in too many beers other than a fresh hop beer. At least nothing that I've really seen. You can make a more vegetal, or more, I guess I should say, more of a noble type characteristic of a beer. But really to get that fresh hop, that fresh, juicy, it tastes like almost like there's times where you'll drink it and you're sometimes looking for the leaves in your mouth left over. And I love that. That's one of my favorite parts about a fresh hop beer especially. So they tend to be more in the IPA range. You'll see some pales, you'll see some lagers that have been coming through. Those are all, awesome beers that I'm really, really stoked about the beers and about the experimentation that people are coming out with fresh hop beers. You're seeing more and more. It used to just be Northwest IPAs, bitter it out, tons of aroma. But now that New England IPAs, Northwest IPAs, those, you're starting to see more and more kind of variants in an IPA, in a beer, even in a pale, in a DIPA, things like that. You're starting to see those kind of branch out a little bit more and more. They're kind of playing around with it a little bit more and more. So even in, man, I'd say the last 5 years or so, a lot of the fresh hop practices have, I don't want to say changed, but people are starting to get a little bit more adventurous with it. And you'll see most of those changes coming in where you're adding fresh hops. We'll get to that. But like I said, you're seeing fresh hops now. You're starting to see in lagers, and I saw CDA the other day, which I'm really hoping Cascadian Dark Ales are making it come back. That's my passion project right there. So it's getting to be a really, really fun thing. And you know, being from the Northwest, that's why I really have a special place in my heart. It does, I'm not too sure how many farms are down that area or how often you guys are able to brew with fresh hops, but there's something about going to a farm and really meeting the growers, walking through the fields, you know, pulling them right off the vines and opening them up, looking at the luteolin glands and the cones. There's just something really, really special about that. And to be able to take that and put that into a beer is really kind of the fun part about fresh hop. So I kind of already might have hit on a lot of these, but why it's exciting. So you pull those new aromas and those oils that you find mostly in that, in those bracteoles in the luteolin glands. A lot of those will get burned off in that pulling. So that process of when we take the hops off the vine, process them out, and then dry them. That drying method will usually kill off a lot of the aromas. You'll still get a lot of the good ones, but a lot of those essential oils, which gives you that green, fresh flavor, those are oftentimes burned off through. So this is a really cool way to get those that would normally not be there and get them into that beer, which is really, really cool. You know, I work for YCH now. I work with Steve. Connecting growers to brewers is another just huge, huge thing that we always really try to do. And it's another really cool thing about what Fresh Hop has to offer, is normally you don't really see these growers. They're just kind of off in the fields doing their own thing. They're working their ass off, but, you know, they kind of tend to be a bit of an unsung hero in a lot of this. So this is that time. And I know, you know, they personally love getting to meet these growers or meet these brewers when they're coming into town, just to show off what they're doing, show off their new processes, meet you face to face. I'm sure a lot of them have tried your beer. So really just seeing those faces connected to the beer, seeing people using these hops that they've worked so hard for throughout the entire year. That's part of what is so cool about fresh hops. It's I'll say it a couple more times, but it really is just kind of a heartstring beer. It's not as technical as a lot of the beers you'll brew, but with it, it just has a lot of fun things that you get. And you get to meet those people involved in it, which is the next one, brings brewers closer to their ingredients as well. You know, coming up as a brewer, I know through the first, at least, 5 years of my career, I would see hops, I would see yeast, I would see malts, but I would see it in its finished product. I would see it in a pelleted form. I would just never really look too far past that. Other than, you know, I knew its alphas, I knew its oils, but other than that, I had no real clue about how it came in, how it got pulled off, how much work goes into those day to day just to get it to the point where it's off the vine and in our hands. So it's a really cool thing. And with it being within 24 hours, a lot of the time these beers are, you're driving down at 3 in the morning, you're driving down just with whatever hop is ready to go that day. And you're picking them up, and that beer is going into your brew by noon or by 1. And it's just, it's part of the fun thing. So to get these brewers and to get all of us in there and get our hands on it and see how it's done, that's part of the love of it as well. So I kind of talked about a little bit of the just joy of getting down there, walking through the farm, but that's kind of what I wrote here of just, I don't know if you guys have been able to, been lucky enough to just go walk through a hop farm at all, but getting in there and the aroma of just all these hops just hit you like an absolute brick wall. It's one of the coolest things I can say. And if any of you guys have ever made it out to selection or harvest or anything like that in Yakima, the air almost feels heavier. It almost feels like it's just ripe with the smell of hops. You step out the door, it hits you, and it just washes over. And it's a neat thing to be able to pass off that aroma and just that excitement of being able to smell it in the air into it. So again, it's only that part of the reason why it has a lot of the hype. One, it's fantastic. I've had so many just killer beers using fresh hops, but it can only be brewed this 1 month of the year, maybe a month and a half tops. But this is the time. This is the one time that we can brew this beer and really have fun with it and get in there and try things and try these fresh hops in different ways and try these different aromas, try out new hops that maybe haven't been used in a fresh hop sense before. But really, it's just during this 1 month, you'll see just a ton of brewers. I think I know a couple of the brewers, and when I was at Fremont, I think we did 27 or 28 brews of fresh hop during the month. So it was a nonstop. We would have one person just driving back and forth to Yakima, picking up hops, driving right back, dumping that in the brew, driving right back for another beer later. And we were just pumping them out, and it's a really, really cool thing to be able to, I guess, just in the general consumer as well, to be able to kind of educate them on what a fresh hop is, what this takes to be brew this beer, and how just cool and exciting this beer is. So again, fresh hops is just an absolute. It's close to my heart. It's something I've done a ton of, and it's produced some of my favorite beers. Really excited to be talking about it. So timing-wise on fresh hops, as you can probably guess, it's during harvest season, which is going to range from late August to early October, September being that main month in there. So when you're kind of building a beer, you want to kind of base it on your pick window. So pick windows are incredibly important in hops. Even it depends on the oils, the acids. So for example, like the later on the vine you leave a hop, the more of those oils you're going to collect, but also at the same time, you're going to pull a little bit more of those harsher flavors as well. So some hops do really well with that. Some don't do as well and need to be picked earlier. So base it on your location, where you're at in the world, where your terroir is, what hops you have available, and kind of build your recipes around those hops, because everywhere in the world is going to have different hops as well. So these are kind of some examples. So those pick windows, like I said, they can be a difference of 12 hours here and there, but these are just kind of a couple random ones that I threw in of just early, mid, and late varieties. I was kind of talking. So early, you'll get the Centennials, Cascades, really good grassy hops. Good for bittering, great for flavor. Usually I see more and more of the aroma hops kind of later in the season, or later in the month, I should say, which is where you see the mid varieties. So citrus, Simcoe, Mosaic. The really, really kind of just a lot of our favorite hops that we tend to love all kind of fall right in that middle, which is part of the struggle of coming up with new hops, coming up with what hops we want to come out with next, at least in terms of the breeding program and everything like that, because there's times where you'll come up with just an awesome hop, and a hop takes 12 years before it's from the time it's first planted in the ground to the time usually it gets a name and it's sold on the masses. So part of the struggle there is sometimes you'll just get a great hop, but it also falls right in line with a citrus, Simcoe, Mosaic. So that makes it really tough on a grower saying, oh, would I rather grow in this hop, or would I rather grow Citra, or would I rather grow Simcoe, would I rather grow Mosaic? So that mid variety is always kind of where you'll really hit your bottleneck a little bit in terms of the beers you want to brew. That's right when those hops are, down to the hour of boom, 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 Citrus, Simcoe, Mosaic, just right, and just as it's going, it's changing. And things like, the fires a couple years ago played a part. A windy day, a rainy day, those will all throw off that pick window. Maybe by a day, maybe by a little longer, but those all play a bit of a difference. So when you're planning out which brew you want to do, those are all things you need to consider. And with that, there's two methods to really planning out the month of September and how you want to do these fresh hops. So I've seen both. I've seen them done both in different ways at different breweries. But all in all, plan on being a little bit flexible with fresh hops. Oops, sorry. I will go back. Uh-oh. There we go. Sorry about that. Let's get right back to it. There we go. So the two ways that you can kind of go about it is, one, you can plan around you can plan your day, say, I know I'm going to brew next Tuesday. And then based on that day, you can get a bit of a window. You can say, okay, that's probably going to be right in that mid-variety range or right in that early variety range. So I'm hoping for a centennial. But then know that if you go down that day, like I said, those will change from time to time, hour to hour. That can change. So as much as the growers and as much as everybody there would love to accommodate that, sometimes they have a lower yield than they wanted, or they have a way bigger yield than they wanted, and that will tend to change the hop that is being harvested. The other way, which is a little bit more common, the one that I've seen, is you choose your hop and then you are slightly flexible on the day and the time of day. So say I want Citra, you call the grower. Again, that's a good way to just kind of building up that camaraderie between the two. But they'll give you, hey, come down on Thursday or come down on Friday. We're probably going to be doing it that day. So those are kind of the two ways of thinking. Both ways, it's again, like I said, I'll just kind of say it again, but really just sign on for a little bit of fun with fresh hops. There's always a little bit of surprise there. There's always something that's going to change on you. But all in all, it's going to produce a great beer. Fun fact, actually, while we're on this page, so that picture there, I took that last year. That is our Talus hop. So Talus, the way that was named is the I guess the valley between two mountains. So as you can see on this hop, I thought it was one of the coolest hops I've seen. Every single side on all four sides had just a really deep indent on. So if you looked at it almost from the top up, it would almost create an X just because every single one had an indent. So I always thought it was fun. The name it almost got was Dimples. I was really pushing for that one. So I thought I would love to have a dimple hop beer. Okay, so let's get to the nitty gritty of it. Brewing with fresh hops, tips and tricks, things like that. What you need to know about fresh hops. So fresh hops are typically about 70 to 80% water. As we mentioned earlier, it's not going through the kilning process. It's not drying itself out. So that's the main thing that you need to know. It's going to be the difference between the hops that you use. It's going to play an impact on, we'll talk about it in a sec, but it's going to play an impact on pretty much everything you do. It's going to add extra water. It's going to add a little extra oxygen. It's going to add some, obviously the amount you use is going to play into your IBUs a little bit. And with that, just always be aware, okay, this is 70 or 80% water. These are wet hops. So I should also mention, while I'm thinking about it, if you've heard the term wet hop, fresh hop, green hop, those are all synonymous. So there's been some things in the past where they said fresh hop is, as long as it's been within 24 hours off the vine, it's fresh. I've always considered those three synonymous as being a hop that has not been processed or dried. So 70 to 80%. With that, because of that extra water, hops are going to weigh about 6 times as much. So you'll want to use about 6 to 8 times more in weight than you would normally use. So if you're going at 2 pounds per barrel, you're now going to want to go at 12 pounds. I typically have run my IPAs about 15 pounds a barrel, up to 20. I've seen years up to 30 pounds a barrel, which is pretty crazy, but that's just the joy of it. Get crazy with it, have fun with it. There's a lot of cool things you can do. I don't tend to go that high with them. just because I think that there's a bit of a terminal point there where you can add more, but I don't think you're really going to pull too much extra flavor, any extra positive things at that point. Instead, you're only going to be pulling more of that vegetal, more of those kind of non-desirable off flavors that you get from a fresh hop. So because of the amount of hops used, they are going to absorb a good amount of water. So expect that in your brew, in your yields. They are going to pretty much soak up most of that work. So I always suggest if you can throw it in a hot bag, if you can sink that in as you're brewing with it, that's always kind of the way I would suggest it. And that way, when you're pulling it out, you can kind of give it a good squeeze, get the rest of that work in there, because that's all, you know, that's good beer right there, especially with the fresh hop. You want all of that. So definitely find ways to keep that work in there. I've seen people kind of build little paddles and kind of press it down in the mash tun as you go in the hop back. Yeah, just any way to really get what you want out of that beer. Just know that with the extra amount that you're going to use, you're going to see those come through. So as you are brewing, be aware that the extra moisture will also affect your gravity of your work. So with the extra water, that is going to lower your work. I haven't noticed it by too much. I usually do my fresh hops in the kettle in what's called a hop back, which I believe is my next slide. But I haven't seen it too bad, but just that extra water will usually drop me down by about a Play-Doh or two, at least a point or two. And that's been a pretty consistent thing. So with fresh hops, know that you don't have a necessarily like spot on IBU or a spot on alpha acid, or really these are hops that you haven't ever rubbed or smelled before. Every lot's different. Every farm is going to be different with these hops. So just know it's going to affect it, and just kind of sign on for it. That's part of the fun. You can adjust on the mash side if you're worried about your gravity dropping too low. But a lot of the breweries I've been at have just kind of let it happen. Just been like, our gravity is going to fall where it is. We're shooting for a 14.8 or a 15. But if it winds up at, at 14.6, nobody's too upset about it. Still going to make a great beer. And with fresh hops being different year to year, you're not as worried about consistency and consistently hitting that over and over as much as you will be with, say, a Tina. So again, just on the same lines, just be aware that water, it's gonna play a factor on your pH. So be cognizant of that. I usually shoot for a knockout pH around 5.0 to 5.2. That might be a little low compared to some people's standards, but it's something I've found plays really well with the hops in there as well. So use your lactic, use your phos, use your citrus, whatever you're comfortable with. Just use that, I'd say, probably right around the whirlpool or end of boil. After you add these to really, to dial in that pH, because it is going to have an impact. These hops are going to have an impact on your final pH. So I mentioned it earlier, but the most common way to do a fresh hop is in the whirlpool charge. That's where I've seen it mostly done. I've seen it as well in the kettle. All of these all across the board, go ahead and do your 6 to 8 times as much as you would normally do. I found that the kettle can tend to get a bit vegetal in there, but what I do like about throwing hops in the kettle is it does give you a bit of that mouthfeel that I was mentioning earlier, that almost just like green, I don't know if chewy is the right word, but sometimes when I think of a fresh hop beer, I almost drinking, you're almost imagining you're drinking some hops. That just distinct of a hop flavor. And I think throwing some of the boiled gives you a little bit of that. You're not going to want to build your IBU calculator based on these hops just because you don't have a set alpha acid. You don't really have set parameters for what these hops are. So I'll mention it later too, but I usually suggest with your bittering charge, I would choose a hop that you know well, and I would choose one that plays well and that you can dial in your IBU, dial in with that. That way you can play with your fresh hops later. Really get that aroma that you're hoping for, rather than wasting them early, where you're not really going to get them. The utilization on fresh hops is honestly pretty terrible in terms of bitterness, but what you are going to get is just a ton of aroma from it. So I always suggest, using it later more as an aroma if possible. I think that's really where you're going to find your benefit from it. With that being said, a dry hop as well. I've seen it. I don't love doing it on the cold side. There's a couple reasons. One being contamination. Since these are brand new hops right off the vine, there's bugs in them. There's dirt. Hopefully there's no mildew, but there might be a couple in there. There's gonna be some gnarly stuff on there that you don't necessarily wanting to get into a cold beer after you just did all this work, making this awesome work. You don't necessarily want to risk contaminating it on the cold side. With that being said, I've had some really, really good cold side fresh hops as well, but they've also been at larger breweries that aren't canning them, that are selling them strictly on draft, and those kegs tend to go maybe after a day, week tops. So they never really have to worry too much about any kind of contaminant, anything like that. It just goes too quick. So I like it in the whirlpool charge. It's really, really where I found its best uses. You're getting that aroma, but you're also pasteurizing it, and you're getting all the funky stuff burned off and cleaned up in your beer. But with that, you want to be aware that you're not leaving it on hot for too long. So the whirlpool charge in a hopback has really been where I've found that sweet spot. So if you're not aware of what a hopback is, I apologize if you guys are, but I'll be a little repetitive here. So a hopback is essentially a preferably jacketed, enclosed extra vessel that you can add your hops in and run your wort on top of your hops. There should be a false bottom in this to allow yourself to strain all the hops out of the beer that you're trying to knock out. And a lot of the time there's a mesh screen as well to make sure you're not clogging up your heat. Usually I will just replace whirlpool and just throw it in the hot bag and then just knock out pretty much straight from the hot bag. So we won't go ahead just yet, but with another thing to note with the hot bag as well is that your because of the sheer surface area of these hops and the amount you use, and the fact that you're pulling it from the vine and then probably throwing it into a freezer for a while until you're ready to put them in, it is going to drop your whirlpool temperature. So I know kind of a new thing recently is a lot of breweries, and for good reason, have been dropping their whirlpool temp maybe down to about probably 200 at the end of boil, maybe dropping it down to about 180 for whirlpool. You can do that a little bit. I would not suggest dropping it down as much as you normally do, because those hops are going to cool down. So obviously you want to keep it above 160, which is the pasteurization point. But just kind of be aware, if you are dropping your whirlpool, know that those hops are going to cool it down, just based on the sheer amount. So best practice with the hopback is, since it has that false bottom to it, I always say a lot of brewers and breweries I've seen have used their mash tun. They've doubled their mash tun as their hopback. One, because it has a false bottom. Two, because the rakes actually do kind of tend to help it grow and bigger. So as you're transferring to your kettle, once you're finished with that, clear out your mash tun as quick as you can and get it really, really clean. Obviously, you don't want that maltiness in your beer at the end. So if you can pull your screens up and spray underneath there, pull your screens up. I don't know if you necessarily have to do a CIP. I definitely don't think you need to do a SANI or anything like that. But make sure you get as much of that malt characteristic out of there, or else that's just going to add a bad off flavor as well. So fill it up. Once you have it cleaned and empty, add your hops while you're in your boil. Once you're in your boil, I tend to just transfer it right over into your hop back as quick as you can. And I've done two methods once you're in the hop back. So on one brewery, which was a very large brewery, we would transfer it over, and second we got the last of our beer in, we would start our knockout right away. And the thought there was it was already such a big batch. Some of that beer was on that, were on those hops for probably, 30, 40 minutes during that transfer. So the thought there was then it would take another 34 minutes or 30, 40 minutes to transfer off of it. I will usually say maybe about an hour and a half contact time tops if you can get that. If you're on a smaller system, I have seen people their hop back and recirculate that work from the bottom and recirculate right on top. That also will give you the added benefit of the filtration process as well. So at least as good as you would get from a normal brew. Don't need to stim, don't need to do anything like that. Just that recirculation. Clear your beer of anything that you don't want. So just some random extra tips. We hit on this earlier, but consider bittering with a known hop, a known commodity. I really like extracts just because I know exactly what I'm going to get. I've been using Simcoe extract a ton recently. It's just a nice, clean beer. And it's a nice, clean bitterness. And with these, I really try to let my fresh hop shine. That is the hope for this beer. That's what you're trying to show off. Like I said, it's only one time during a year that you're able to brew with this hop. So let's show it off and really put it out. So as well as knowing your alphas, we talked about how you hope to get those hops in 4 hours. So if you are using it on your hot side, by the time you're dry hopping, you probably want to use that same hop that you use hot side versus dry hop with. So if you're saving it during fermentation, it's probably going to be day 4, maybe day 3 at the earliest that you're really throwing those fresh hops in as a dry hop, which you don't want those sitting around too long. That's when you get oxidized. That's when you get those veggie flavors, the off flavors that you just. So I always suggest if you are going to dry hop with it, get a new harvest, get something new, get it that day. Don't let it sit in your fridge for 4 days and then dry hop with it. That will show up. Hit on it again. Don't let your beer sit too long on your wort. Whether it's hot side, cold side, anywhere you're at. Get those hops in. You're mostly looking for aroma at this point, so you're going to get your aroma after 24 hours, 48 hours. Find what works best for your brewery. Do a couple side-by-sides if you can on which one you like the most. But if it's in the whirlpool, like I said, maybe hour and a half tops in your wort of contact time by the time you start adding your wort to the time you're done knocking out. If you are going to use it on a fresh hop, I would say make sure you're dumping anything off the bottom of your cone after 24, 48 hours. I don't think you're going to get too many desirable flavors if you're leaving them on there. You're going to pull more of those veggie and more of those kind of nasty flavors that you don't want fresh. Again, yeah, we kind of already hit on it, but just dry hopping, it's mostly just a contaminant. That's the biggest worry. It's not so much about the flavor, but that being said, if you are incredibly careful with your cleaning process, if you are incredibly careful with your purging, as you're brewing with it, as you're adding those hops in, because water obviously has oxygen in it. So you do tend to run a bit of a risk of oxidation. Just be very, very aware of that. I always throw on a little bit of a CO2 blanket if I'm going to go up top and do a dry hop, and I would absolutely suggest it here. Say maybe even throw in your beers. I've heard of people throwing in their fresh hops into the fermenter before they knock out. That seems to have worked. It's they're always a little bit goofy. I'm always a little bit worried about contamination. That's kind of my big pet peeve there is contamination. So I personally don't tend to do too many fresh hops, too many dry hops with my fresh hops. just for the thought there, so I can kind of sleep a little bit better at night, knowing that I'm not throwing anything bad into my finished product. Yeah, so we hit that already. Of the fresh hops in house. So don't leave them around, don't open them, don't get them there, and then let them sit for a day. That's your worst enemy with fresh hops is time and heat. But all three of those are at risk during a fresh hop year as well. So it's just something to be aware of. Anything you can do to minimize those are the best way to do it. So, and then for drinking, I have noticed the shelf life, and I'm assuming it's the extra water, the extra oxidation in there, but the shelf life does tend to drop way quicker. And hopefully that's a good thing. Hopefully you never have to worry about that. Hopefully all the beers that you brew are going to get drank nice and quick, being a fresh hop beer. But I noticed a pretty steep drop off after maybe 2-3 months, to where it goes from just an awesome beer to an okay beer. I haven't had anything that turns just too bad, but it definitely is not the beer that you were hoping for when you first brewed that beer. The joy of fresh hop is brew it fresh, drink it fresh. That's how you're going to get the best of it. Everybody gets to be involved in it. Everybody gets to have their hands on it. If you want to know exactly what citrus smells like off of the vine, a fresh hop citra will get you that. Get you those aromas. So really, I mean, that's mostly it. It's there's huge positives to a fresh hop, and I think those far outweigh any of the features that come with it. But really, just I didn't finish that. Just have fun when you're designing the recipe. Like I said, you haven't smelled these hops yet. You haven't rubbed these hops yet. You don't know what the lot's going to be like. You don't know what the IBUs or the alpha acids are. So I always say when you're designing a recipe, just have a little bit of wiggle room one way or the other. It makes it just it's a fun experience to brew with fresh hops, and keep it fun. Just with the gravity dropping, with the difference in alpha acid, with just the difference in how each hop is going to play with a hot side versus cold side. Those are all going to change from fresh hop to fresh hop, really. So just have fun with it. Yeah, it's beer. We do it because we love it, and this is one of the cool ones. So I can't wait. Hopefully I get to see you guys here in person pretty soon. Hopefully we'd love to get you guys up for selection and some farm tours and checking out Yakima here pretty soon. But yeah, this is something that's pretty close to my heart. So, yeah, I guess at this point, if you guys have any questions, here's a couple random pictures from just the last harvest I was at. So the top left is my car. So that was a trip up to Seattle I did. That was about as full as I could be. I actually got pulled over on that drive. He was like, I don't think you can see out of your blind spot. So I was pretty sure he was right. But as you can see, I was doing some carboys. I was doing down on the bottom. It's kind of the trucks and how they'll pick them up off the vine. Those trucks will just drive right through, clip them off the top, and those vines will go right into the processing. And we'll usually have a little diverter right before it goes through. Down on the bottom right, I did that. That was a collab I did with Old Stove. Really good guys, really great brewers. So just a fun thing, but you can kind of see the size of the bags that usually they'll be pulling from. And I think we threw in probably 14 or 15 of those 50-pound bags in on that brew. So that was a fun day. That one, we felt it in our backs that day. But man, that beer was good. Totally worth it. So that's about all I got. I really appreciate it, guys. I will stop sharing.
Well done. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, guys. Yeah. I appreciate it. And I if you guys wanted to ask questions, feel free. I have a video if you guys wanted to watch and just kind of see. It doesn't have sound. It was one I was talking over in a previous webinar I did. But if you guys wanted to watch over it, it might be a little bit of dead air, which nobody loves. But it's a cool video. There's some cool shots in there. You can kind of see the processes as the hops are going through and everything like that. So I might throw it on if you guys want to, think of some questions. Feel free to ask.
I think you and Steve are in really interesting positions of having been longtime brewers now working for a hop company. And I'm
Mhm.
wondering, have you guys done specific research on the YCH side as far as which oils are lost and through the kilning process and how they survive different parts of the brewing? Is that something you guys are looking at?
It's something I personally look at. I don't think we've done at YCH too many specific fresh hop trials. And I think that's mostly just because during the month of September, everybody's just so crazy busy. We'll brew them, but we haven't really ran them through too many trials, at least through our sensory or through anything like that. It's definitely on the docket, and we're really kind of building up our brew house and our brew system in there. I've been brewing there about 8 months now, so it's really we're building it big, and those are all the things I'm really hoping for. I know we have done studies in terms of beer soluble hop compounds, so survivability in hops and things, but that's not quite the same thing in terms of what makes it through the kilning process. That's more on what makes it through the actual brew.
Right. And then
So,
and then not only what makes it through the kilning process, but also of the things that you are able to preserve from, wet hopping, how volatile are those in the brewing process, or their solubility differences that, you can add them in the whirlpool and you won't lose them to the extent that you might think you would based on them going off and kilning.
yeah, I mean it's a great thought. It's something I'm super interested in. I don't know. I mean, we have the ability to. We should probably in this next year to run it through the GCMS and the QTOP, things like that. We're lucky enough to be able to have. So that's something I would love to see, and I would love to see the ones that come through. But yeah, that's probably in the future. Probably coming up in this next
I have a question, JT. So,
year. Of course.
because of all the water and the kind of like the more herbal, grassy notes, and I don't have a whole lot of experience brewing with fresh hops. I obviously wasn't on the West Coast most of my brewing career, but like variety to variety, is there less perceivable differences in aroma because of that herbal, grassy note, or would you still see the difference from variety to variety? I guess I'm trying to say, is it less distinct?
You'll see, and there definitely are. I think the bigger the cones too, the more water weight those hold, so the less of that aroma you're really going to get from it. So things like an Idaho 7, the cones are like an inch and a half long. They're huge cones, and with that, there's not a ton of lupulin in there. There's not a ton of those oils that you really want. But just based on the sheer amount of that hop, we were able to get it on in a pelleted stance. We're able to get what we hope for. But on a fresh hop, because they are such big cones, like you said, they're going to hold a lot more of that water. It might be slightly diluted versus, say, a Citra, which are the little tiny cones. You're going to get a ton of those. You're going to get a ton of surface area from them. And each one of those just packs so much of that lupulin. I do tend to think that the smaller cones give you slightly more aroma to them, slightly more of what you're hoping for versus the big kind of watered, logged down. But that being said, I mean, like, don't sit on Idaho 7 either. It's, even with all that water weight to it, it's the amount of lupulin you pull from that, the amount of aroma.
What is your favorite variety?
Oh man. I'm always a sucker for Simcoe. It's tough though. It's like picking your favorite kid. I've always been a sucker for Simcoe. I love the fresh hop it gives. I think it's the truest to what you smell on the farm. Like when I walk through a hop farm, Simcoe is kind of what I get there. But man, Citra is incredible. I've had some really good cashmeres in the past, some cashmere fresh hops, which I never really, before I brewed with it, I never thought I would really love a cashmere fresh hop, but it gave just a really cool herbal, almost kind of a noble note to it. At the same time, just being, I think we used that one in a dip. It turned out awesome. It had a bit of that resin, a bit of that, almost, like a weird way, like a sweet kind of cannabis flavor. That's, it gave me that to it in a cashmere. That was really, really nice. Versus a lot of the other ones, which are just really fruity, aromatic, green in its own right. But Yeah, there's a ton of really good ones. Centennial is a great one, and that's kind of a historical hop too. So you'll see a lot of people using Centennial. Number one is it's a really, really early hop. So if you are trying to brew multiple throughout your month of September, you probably want to choose maybe a top 5, top 6, top 7. So Centennial is usually on there as well because it's earlier. Cascade, I've seen a lot of Cascade. But usually, you know, Simcoe, Citra are awesome. Mosaic's a great one. It gives off that really cool berry. Really can't go wrong. There's not too many I've had that I've listed, but I'd say Citra, Simcoe are a favorite. Idaho 7 is quickly moving up that list too.
You know, I'm kind of curious about the dry hopping, and you know, it's crazy to think about adding potentially things like mites and aphids and whatever might be grown on hops. But you know, people making fruit beers have dealt with that for a long time, and some of the best fruit beers are the ones where the fruit is added fresh and not processed, and it's added late in fermentation. I'm kind of curious if there's a lot of data on breweries experiencing contamination from, you know, fresh hopping on the cold side, or if it's more just like a healthy or possibly unhealthy paranoia.
Yeah, and that's a good question. I'm not sure if there's been any write-ups on it. I think it might just be like an old superstition, you know, at this point. Like you said, it's a weird thought thinking that you're gonna throw that kind of stuff in, that you know, you're watching things like hops being like picked up off the ground, and you're like, in there. I've seen things like a full cricket. You know, I've seen some pretty crazy things in some fresh hop Gaylords before, and I think it's just more. It might just be more of a mental thing at that point. Ooh, don't want to throw that in, but I've never personally heard of a beer getting contaminated from a dry hop, but also, like I said, I don't think a lot of the fresh hop beers last enough to get to that point to really notice if something does start turning.
And dry hopping with it is such a nightmare that you probably need something like a torpedo to you know, deal with it, and that might strain out the crickets.
Absolutely. Yeah, there you go. I mean, and maybe, you know, it might be something to where maybe you could do a, you know, like you said, a hop egg, or, you know, a hop bagger, you know, do something like that where you can maybe recircuit, and that way you're not getting those really funky things. You know, burn it before and just really like steam those hops a little bit. Hopefully keeping some of that aroma, but kill off some of those contaminants. Yeah, I don't know if there's been too many write-ups, but like I said, I haven't seen any contaminated beer, but it is more just kind of a mental hurdle, at least for me personally. And like you said, just the logistics of, you know, either walking up a ladder or going up on going up a 240 barrel tank and dropping in. At that point, that would be probably.
Yeah, and I would see that as the kind of thing.
1,500 pounds.
Right, that would need to be like on a small scale, like a brew pub. It's going to go on tap today, and it's going to be gone in a week, or you know, fresh hop lambic.
And I think you'll be fine in that sense. And honestly, I'd love for you to try a side by side if you could. If you know that beer is going to get drank quick, I'd love to hear kind of, you know, what you come up with. It's something I've been wanting to do on the brewery as well. So probably this next harvest, I'm going to be kind of playing around with a lot of that. So I can't wait. I'm on a little 1-barrel system for the first time in my life versus I think the lowest I was on before this was about a 30-40, and then I was on a 120 barrel for a while. So being down on a 1-barrel, it's pretty neat. It's pretty neat to be able, like, oh, I'm going to do a side by side. Let's try this out. If it turns terrible, if it gets contaminated, I can dump it. Hopefully that never happens. Hasn't happened yet, but you know, it's half the fun of it, I suppose. It's part of fresh hop. It's fun. It's to try it out, you know.
That actually segues into my question pretty well. When you're like upping your hop content by like 6 to 8 times, what's the biggest capacity brew you've seen that used fresh hops, and how much weight of hops did you use?
So a lot of the time I've seen breweries essentially build their beers based on how many hops they can fit. So a lot of the time you'll top it off, and then when you know you're going to get that beer, that's usually about the top that you're going to get. The highest dosage rate I've ever seen was about a 30 pounds, which was crazy. It was a good beer. It wasn't too nuts, but it was a good beer. It's like I said, I think just at some point, the positives you're gonna get from it kind of hit a peak, and then after that, I think you're just kind of wasting hops at that point because you're gonna get the aroma you want.
And that, not to be crass, but that 30 pounds per barrel beer, how much did they have to charge for a pint of that?
Oh man, I don't know. Oh man, I think that's also kind of part of it. Is sometimes, I mean, fresh hops aren't super expensive. I think a lot of growers try to sell it at a very decent price in terms of what it's cost, just because they want to get that out. They really love that face to face. It's their way of kind of, like I said, kind of showing off that year's worth of hard work that they've done. Fresh hop, I know harvest is their time of year to shine pretty much. They're drinking these beers. These beers are all winning awards. Their farm is being called out personally, which is really neat. I'm sorry, yeah.
So City Brewing up in La Crosse, Wisconsin, with a 1,000-barrel brew house would get a truckload of fresh hops in.
Man, that'd be crazy.
I'm wondering, Gary Luther, do you know if they're doing anything like this in Germany? You're muted.
No, I'm sorry, not that I know. In Germany, they harvest them. They harvest hops. They take them in. They dry them. They extract them, and so on and so forth. Most like 99% of the brewers in the United States. No change. There was a Dr. Miller hop extraction factory in Coburg, Germany, that way back in the 70s, he was doing extraction with liquid carbon dioxide already early at that time. And he would extract the cold baleen and everything and sell that as an extract. I'm sure that probably you could do the same thing with fresh hops. Freeze them until you need them right away, and then come back. I'm sure you don't lose too much of the essential oils. Certainly none of the alphas.
Novel idea. See, YCH could look into that. Freeze drying.
It's a really cool thought. That's something I've always loved the idea of finding ways to get the hops all across the country.
So what differentiates that from cryo hops then?
So cryo, yeah. So if we're gonna freeze them cryo, yeah, you'll break them, they shatter, and then we're essentially just extracting just the pure lupulin glands. So that's what you're hoping for is in cryo, it's just pure lupulin, which is then pelleted. Versus if we were gonna freeze the frozen fresh hop or something like that, you would still get that Bragg fraction. It would still be closer to probably a T90 at that point, even if it was the fresh hop. But yeah, it's versus lupulin, which is just, or versus cryo, which is just, I think fresh hop, a lot of the good and the bad comes from that Bragg fraction. So that's kind of where that difference would be. One, you're really hoping for that Bragg, the other, you're really.
I hate to say this. Thanks, JT. Fantastic presentation. I hate to say it, but I have to leave. I have another engagement.
No problem. Yeah, thank you for
Great
joining.
seeing all of you. Tom, Gary, Brad,
Hey,
Joe,
Chris.
and
Blessings to you.
Joe, and Michael.
Nice to meet you.
Everybody. Tom,
So long, Chris.
take care now.
See you, Chris. Bye.
Bye.
So does that conclude are we on social hour?